The Hoffman Show on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, where you will see if you are watching the face of a man who is on your television many nights on NFL Network hosting NFL Total Access. It's my old pal Mike Yam. Mike, what's up, man?
It is great to see you, man. Great to hear your voice as well. And for those who don't know, Craig, how long have I known you, man? Because now I'm going to start feeling old because you were still in school when I met you, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, which is over a decade at this point, which is just horrifying.
Yeah, that's bonkers. But you and I crossed paths when I was at ESPN. Thrilled for your success, dude. It's awesome to see you. You were like the champion networker of networkers. So I'm glad a lot of this stuff has actually paid off for you.
Well, I've talked about this on the show previously a couple of times before, but like that intern class that we had at ESPN when you were there, I mean, you were still young in your career. Let's not make you sound like you're ancient over there. Yeah. But that class was nuts because it was me who's gone on to do whatever I'm doing, whatever size this is. Jamie Erdahl, who's hosting Good Morning Football. Jonah Javad, who's killing it on TV in Dallas. And that's just the three people that I think went down the on-air track. There's a bunch of like really high-level producers and stuff. It was they do a good job with that intern program up there in Bristol.
Yeah, they definitely do, because when you're in Bristol, Connecticut, the only thing you can do is actually focus in on work. And it's kind of crazy, man, because Jamie obviously is having a ton of success. And I actually just saw her this summer when we did our talent summit. So it's been awesome. But I'm 41 now, man. As you can see, like I had none of the salts in the hair. The pepper, it's starting to get outnumbered here. But once again, awesome to see that you're thriving.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Well, we're excited to have you on the show, and hopefully it's something we can do a couple times throughout the year, talk a little football. No and obviously the big story here is everything going on with the Commanders. And I'm just curious, like for you guys at NFL Network, how much more on the radar they've been? Let's see, it's been almost 2 months. That's crazy. 6 days. It'll be September 20th, which will be 2 months since the date of the sale. But like, what's been the talk around the Commanders since Josh Harris bought the team, and how much more are they on your radar, as opposed to just going, oh, God, we got to talk about them when something bad happens?
Yeah, look, I mean, because there's been plenty of those stories over the years, but I think to your point, there's a lot of sense of positivity from a national perspective. I would imagine that's definitely the case for you guys in the city. But what's fascinating to me, there was one moment that really stands out over the course of the last month or so with regard to the Commanders, and it stems around training camp. Sherry Burris, who's one of our reporters who covers the Commanders, also has the Ravens, did a hit, and I could not get over, Craig, the visual images of what we saw on television. There was a screenshot of training camp, and it was the same sort of hilly, grassy area overlooking the field from a year ago. And no joke, and this is not me being dramatic and saying there was like 3 fans there. Legitimately, there were 3 fans that were in attendance for that day's practice. And it wasn't like it was downpour or rain. It was a relatively clear day in that picture. And then fast forward to what it was this year, same exact area, completely packed with fans. And I think we all can appreciate as football fans the positivity and the want to have your team or our team, depending on your city, do well and to support this squad. And I think from a national perspective, it was probably hard, clearly hard, watching obviously losses pile up and then some of the issues off the field around this team to really support this Commander squad. But it looks like there's a complete 180 and there's some positivity. Week 1 win will certainly help the case. I actually was impressed by what I saw from Washington in the preseason, and I'm kind of hoping that Sam Howell continues to develop. I think this wide receiving core is still one of the more underrated ones in the league. And who knows? I didn't think that Washington would finish last. I thought there was maybe a little bit of upheaval in that NFC East, but the way the Giants look, man, maybe that door is open for Washington.
Yeah, definitely. And it's weird because it was a division that surprised a lot of people last year, having 4 teams in it until the very end. Washington ultimately finishing 8-1 is the last place team. And then everyone just expects they'll be good again. I'm like, do you guys not watch the NFC East? Like, it's never the same year to year. Dallas looks great in week 1. That's the team I thought was going to fall off. And maybe I'll still be right because that's how the NFL works. You talk about Howell, though, specifically. What did you like from him in the preseason that you saw, and then obviously in week 1?
So number one, I thought there was a leadership ability that you could feel. I think there was a sense of that with Heineke as well. I mean, guys just kind of rallied around it. Sometimes it's easy to point to the statistics, and certainly the wins are the only thing that really matters on any given week, and you want those W's to pile up. But there was an it factor when I watched Heineke on the field, and clearly guys supported him. Now, I think there's something to be said, and I'll use an example of Brock Purdy, for example. When Brock Purdy takes over that starting job last year, there was a moment on the field where he had a rushing touchdown. It might have been his first TD, if I'm not mistaken. Gets into the end zone. Every team is going to celebrate a score. That is standard in the NFL. But watching it on film, I'm like, damn, like this team actually likes Brock Purdy. You can feel it through the television screen. And I think that there's a little bit of that sense when I'm watching Sam Howell. It's certainly not at that level just yet, but I do get the sense that clearly there's support around this team starting quarterback. And I know every player is going to tell you that that's the case, but I think behind closed doors, the reality is that's not always what the situation is. And guys will certainly question leadership, but I think Eric Bieniemy right now has got him in a pretty good spot. I was almost surprised by some of the critiques from some of the players this offseason around what Eric was trying to implement, but this team has only got one place to go based off of last season on the offensive side, and that's up. And I think Sam right now has got some pieces. Terry McLaurin is, I think, maybe the most underrated wide receiver in the NFL, and I think he's spectacular to go and watch. But to me, I think Sam Howell, the command that he's got, Craig, to me has been one of the more impressive things early in his career.
Mike Yam, NFL Network, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So I was going to go to Terry next and say, like, if you make your list of wide receivers, how far down do you get until you say Terry McLaurin's name? I hate like true lists because it's impossible and you're splitting hairs and you get into situations and, oh, well, like Jamar Chase gets to play with Joe Burrow. That's an advantage. But if you put them in buckets and tiers, like how many guys are in a tier clearly ahead of Terry? Is he in the next tier? Is he third tier? Like, how do you try to rank him?
So I use the term underrated on purpose because I think your question's a really good one. When you watch him, the production, there are certain guys like, I don't know, do you put Mike Evans in the elite category? Every single year, I mean, he's a 10-year guy. He's got 1,000 yards receiving every single year, right? So like
one more you want.
Exactly. But I think there's the splash plays, what Justin Jefferson is capable of, Tyreek Hill. I will say this, Tyreek, Chase, Jefferson, no particular order, depending on the week, you go, hey, best wide receiver in the NFL. If you said to me that's the elite class, sure. But I think the bucket gets actually bigger in that next tier. Like, I think every single NFL team would love to have Mike Evans on their squad. I tell you what, I think every team would love to have Terry McLaurin on their particular team. So to me, he's not one of the first 3 or 4 wide receivers that you're going to name, but he's right on the fringe of elite. And I think the issue that I have with how he's viewed, I think most fans outside of that DC area would tell you, Terry's probably, the second or third tier, maybe closer to the third tier. Like, he's not one of the first guys whose name you're going to say. And the reality is, right, like, you'll talk Garrett Wilson coming off a rookie of the year campaign. He's going to get a ton of love. I don't know what that season's going to look like now that Zach Wilson is that team's starting quarterback, but Wilson will certainly come to mind. Chris Olave, like, I think there's this huge rush to try to get the splashy name that's out there. For whatever reason, Terry's name is not talked about in that regard. But my Lord, I'd love to have him on my team. There's no question. So I don't say elite, but I go in that first tier right after that category.
Yeah, no, it's because he's had 1,000 different quarterbacks since he was a rookie in 2019. What I think is interesting, and people are going to learn pretty quickly this year, is Jahan Dotson is banging down the door to get into that tier with him. I think there's a real good chance. We've said this on the show a ton, so this will probably be more shocking to you than it is the audience. But like, I think Dotson's going to lead the team in receptions this year and possibly yardage, probably touchdowns. Like, which isn't to say Terry's not going to have a good year. It's like Jahan is that skilled of a route runner and that explosive, and he's just got something with Howell and this offense. It's just it's a perfect fit, man.
Yeah, Dotson to me has got the wow factor out there. Terry's more of the dog, which I sort of lean towards. Last year watching Dotson on the football field, there were a few times he'd make a play, you're like, damn, okay, like I see what's up here. I think the skill in the route running that you made reference to is certainly a big reason why. But I think even your point on the various quarterbacks, we actually looked this up. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it might have been coming off the second preseason game for Washington. I remember we were getting ready for Total Access, and I turned to our researcher. I'm like, man, how many different quarterbacks have started games over X period of time? And I was shocked by the number for this Washington team. And I think the reality is, to have success in the NFL, consistency at that spot is certainly key. And that hasn't been the case for whatever reason, injury, lack of performance. There's been obviously some issues at that spot, but I love the Dotson pick. And I think that speaks to why you got to feel at least a little optimistic. Change in regime at the ownership level, but also in terms of executing. Sam doesn't walk into a situation, Craig, where like the cupboard's bared, right? Like there are real playmakers on that side of the football that should help out his cause. And then on the defensive side, you got to feel, cautiously optimistic this team's going to bring the heat.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that's the last thing I want to ask you about for Washington before we take a little bit of a look around the league. Mike Yam's with us, of course, host of NFL Total Access. Before we go, you also get to hear about his children's book, which is something that I don't think I've ever gotten to say about a guest before. But if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it over his right shoulder there. By the way, aren't you glad I said right shoulder? Because if you're on camera and trying to figure out when they flip the things, and I never know which way to point. I tried to fix my hat the other day and I turned it the wrong way.
So the fact that you think that your verbal cue of right actually helped me out. I would be the worst. This is legitimately the first time I've actually gotten the point right over the shoulder. I would be the world's worst, and it's not even close, weather person. The green screen thing, man, to me is not my friend. So this was just dumb luck that I pointed in the right direction. And if you make reference to it again, there is a chance that I actually go the wrong way. So
okay. It seems like a lovely newspaper article over there. It's just not what you wrote for children. All right. The last thing I was going to say was the defense.
Yeah.
I think they could be top. I mean, certainly, like if they're not top 10, I feel like it's a disappointment. Yeah. I think they could scratch at the door of top 5. I think if Chase Young ever can get back and get this whatever situation figured out with his neck and play at a high level, they could be a top 3 defense. Am I taking Ashburn crazy pills, or as someone who's got a wider scope on the whole league, is that a fair prognostication?
So I think the first half of what you were saying is completely accurate. There is the potential for this team to be a top 10 defense. There's no question. Top 5, I do pause a little bit, and I think for a couple of reasons. There's some really good teams, and we always talk about the AFC and the elite squads on that side, and there is clearly more depth of top tier teams, although a bunch of them are 0-1 coming off of week 1. But the point is, holistically, and I'm not one of those dudes ready to pass great judgment after 1 week. Generally speaking, AFC, I think we can all agree, is probably stronger than the NFC. That said, if you go off some of these defensive metrics, like Dallas to me scares the bejesus out of me. And in that division, like that would worry me. I don't think Philadelphia has taken a step back despite some of the turnover. You lose Hargrave and he goes to the Niners, and we haven't even gotten to them. There's going to be a hit there. But the problem is they basically take all these national champions out of Georgia and throw them into the mix. Jalen Carter, I think that there's a slew of teams right now. Philly moved up to 9, if I'm not mistaken, to go and grab Carter. There's a bunch of teams in front of them that want defensive players. And this is no disrespect. I mean, Will Anderson, looks like an absolute monster after 1 week. Tyree Wilson, I think we saw him flash coming off of injury in the preseason. I'm like, damn, like this dude looks like a real guy that's out there. My point is, like, upper echelon teams, they got their defensive player. Jalen Carter to me is scary. I mean, that is great from a Philadelphia perspective. And then the Niners had the most impressive win in week number 1. And I know everyone talks about the quarterback room there, but I still think that team is defined by their defense. So I think if you even talk about the San Francisco 49ers, the conversation and that narrative has been about what's happening in that quarterback room. But I still think that team's identity is circled around or centered around that team's defense. So that's 3 teams right there in the NFC that I feel really good about. And we haven't even hit some of those AFC teams. So big picture, I think there's no question that Washington can be in that mix. I just don't know what the ceiling is just yet. And top 3, top 5 seems like a high ceiling for him, but I would be disappointed if it's outside the top 10. There's no doubt.
All right, Mike Yam, NFL Network, is with us here on the Hoffman Show. Go around the league real quick. Obviously, the biggest story in the league is Rodgers. How do you try to contextualize what happened on Monday night? And because the repercussions are so deep, not just for the Jets, but like the NFLPA is talking about playing services. Like there's probably endless storylines off of him going down.
So injuries happen in the league, and this is as unfortunate an injury you're going to have when you're talking about an Achilles injury. But J.K. Dobbins just had the same injury, and call a spade here. I don't think we're talking about playing surfaces if Aaron Rodgers doesn't get hurt, right? So I think the magnitude of all of this stuff, because it's New York, because Aaron Rodgers was the biggest story of the offseason, and the hopes and dreams of all gangrene is sitting there on his arm. And now that that's not the case, there's a sense of panic in that city for that team. And I understand it. Here's the cautiously optimistic approach. One, that defense is still elite. Two, that offense looks better this year, regardless of who's playing quarterback, than it did a year ago. Breece Hall in week 1 against Buffalo, I'm sitting there going, yo, this guy's nasty. And I knew he was nasty last year, but he's legit. And then, oh, by the way, there's Dalvin Cook. Last time I checked, Craig, if you have an elite defense, and the Jets defense is elite, and you can be an effective team running the football, that's generally a recipe for success in the NFL. They have those things. And I actually think Zach, to me, looks different the way he carries himself. There were some mistakes, obviously, on Monday night, but that's not an easy situation to be in. I still like the Jets. I don't like them to win the AFC East at this point, but I think they're going to be pushing for a playoff spot. And I think Aaron Rodgers' post about, I shall rise again, or however he framed it, I was like, are we close to Easter? Like, is Jesus coming out? Like, what's going on right now? But I think it was
actually a Dark Knight reference.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah. God, you're asking the wrong guy for either Easter or the Dark Knight, but that's a different story.
Okay, I actually feel better about it because I read that live they flashed it on Total Access last night. I'm like, man, all right, I get it, but dude, this seems really dramatic to me. But look, I think it also signals to a fan base like, hey, it's all good, guys. I'm going to recover from this, and I'll be back next year. And then we can rinse and repeat in the summer, speculating on what the Jets could be. But I do feel good, and I do think the door now is open. Buffalo didn't look great at times, more specifically Josh Allen. And Miami, who I felt good about heading into this season, all of a sudden scores the most entertaining win of week number 1. And maybe has the best wide receiver in the NFL in Tyreek Hill. I feel good about Miami. And then the Patriots giving the Eagles all they could ask for. Like, that it's strong, very strong.
Yeah. The thing about week 1 is, like, it can be so misleading. I mean, hey, we thought after week 1 Carson Wentz might be an actual viable solution last year. On that. So, it is week 1, but I'll ask you this to wrap up. Is there anything that you saw week 1 that you went either, or you went like, no, like, okay, I feel even better about that thing? Because it can be misleading, but sometimes you have a hunch one way or the other, and you're like, no, this is far more sustainable.
Yeah, I'm not hitting the panic button for Kansas City, for Cincinnati. I'm a little worried about Pittsburgh, the way that they lost that game. I appreciate the fight that we saw in the second half, but I was probably higher than most on Pittsburgh. I'm not off the bandwagon just yet. Craig, I don't know if you knew this, but I'm actually a Giants fan. And, kind of growing up in that Northeast area, New Jersey and New York, the lack of fight that I saw in that second half was a little concerning to me. But, I don't know if that team is built, I don't think they're built for deficits like that. And that's why I'm kind of like storying this in my head. Did I make story anyway? Is that a verb? Anyway,
it is now.
It is now. Yeah, we'll just roll with it. I do have in my head still a cautious optimism around that team, that what we saw in week 1 is just an anomaly and we can just kind of boot it there. But you can't get dominated at home the way that they did. And I think that's why, if I'm Washington, and I know that there were some tougher times in that game and maybe should have won by a larger margin, but they still won. They're 1-0. I think that door's still open. And I don't think Dallas is 40-0 good over a Giants team, despite what we saw there. So I still think Washington's got the potential to make a run. Still concerned a little bit about Big Blue.
All right, Mike Yam, you can catch him on Total Access on NFL Network. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also, if you're a parent out there listening, you need a new book for your kiddo, get fried rice and marinara anywhere that you get your books. Why did you write a children's book, and how long ago did you do this?
So it was a 2020 project. It started out as an animated story, which is available on YouTube. So if any parent, watches it for free on YouTube.
Let's be honest, Mike. Parents in 2023, YouTube, good. Give them the iPad. That's better than a book.
Exactly. So they can actually see it on video, and if the story resonates, you can certainly go and get the physical book, which would be absolutely amazing. But I wrote it because, Craig, there isn't, when I was growing up, I could still tell you the books that I had my mom read to me about 1,000,000 times. And I never had a story that featured an Asian character. I never had a story that had a mixed race character or was about mixed race families. And to me, while things have changed towards the positive, it's still not even close to where I think it should be. And, I just kind of felt like, hey, I got, the ability to do this, and maybe it becomes something, maybe it becomes nothing. And quite frankly, I was unemployed at the time. I'd lost my job in COVID at Pac-12 Network, and was looking to fill some time and sort of touch, handle the creative itch. So I decided to go ahead with this project. And essentially the story is about a Chinese and Italian boy who doesn't know what kind of food to have for his 4th birthday, because he's got his Chinese family that's rolling up to the party, his Italian family that's rolling up, and he feels like he's getting pulled in 2 different directions, and then realizes, well, we can just kind of combine things. And fried rice and marinara is what he comes up with. Spoiler alert, all the kids loved it. And hopefully that story does resonate with some families out there.
That's cool, man. Again, Fried Rice and Marinara is the book, and you can catch Mike on NFL Network, NFL Total Access, weeknights on NFL Network. Mike, appreciate it. This was great. It was phenomenal catching up, my friend, and we'll definitely do it again soon.
Yeah, anytime, man. You need me once again. Always a thrill to see you have some success, man. So thanks again for having me on.
Much appreciated. Thank you, sir.
This is The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.